The interesting thing is I wasn't raising money. I wasn't like, I was just telling this like, in my like really energetic way to somebody. I'm like, yeah, here's what I want to do. I want to be able to revolutionize the way people interact. I want to be able to get, give people more insight on how to sell better, how to make better relationships, and I'll do it through this app. And somebody's like, holy shit, that sounds awesome. Are you looking to raise money? And I'm like, yes, I am. Yes, I am. And it all happened. The craziest thing is we raised $300,000. No, 300, it was something like that. 300 grand in like 3 days. And because I went to somebody, I saw somebody in the VDM community. I was like, holy shit, man, I just raised 100 grand. He goes, why didn't you come to me? I would have given you money. And I'm like, what? What is going on here?
Hi, everybody. I want to welcome you guys to another episode of Trade Secrets by Tripletote. Today, we have a very special guest who's a real good friend of mine. His name is Jeremy Casey, and he has a very interesting entrepreneur career and story that I really feel like you guys could benefit from, because a lot of times we get scared when it's time to make a change in our career or pivot. He's been a master at it, and every time he's done it, he's thrived each time. So I definitely want to get this information out there to you guys. Hey, how's it going, Jeremy?
Doing really well. Thanks, Ant.
No problem. So when we first connected, we connected through Valley Venture Mentors, and that's why I first connected with you and saw that immediately you had a spirit to connect with people. Like you were always happy, always upbeat, always happy, always introducing yourself. It was effortless, and even I looked at that like, wow, that guy really can move through a room, but it's just naturally who you are. It wasn't an act, and you weren't doing it just for a means to an end. So I think that's what first introduced me to you, and actually just going through the room, looking at everybody in the room. But for the audience, let's just take it back to the beginning. Like after high school was college for you, right?
Yeah.
And what school did you go to?
I went to AIC in Springfield for my freshman year, then transferred to Westfield State, where I got my undergrad in economics and business. Then went to back to AIC for my master's.
Wow, that's awesome. And then once you got your degrees, what'd you do next? Like, what career did you pursue?
So actually, out of undergrad, I got a job at a local bank, and they're actually the ones that asked me if I wanted to go back and get my master's.
Wow.
And I kind of played the game of like, hey, I'll do it in a year, right? Put it off. I just got out of school. Really didn't. I liked the community of a school, like in college, but academically, I just, it's like I didn't do poorly in college. I didn't do great in high school, but in college, it was me. I was paying for this, so I really wanted to, have a much better impact. But I still didn't get as much from it, right? I'm an experience-based learner. I learned from other people, and they actually were the ones that encouraged me to go back. And I was in operations of the bank at that time. And so I actually worked full time and did my MBA during work. So at nights.
That's great. Now, how long were you in banking?
That was like 10 or 11 years. Worked my way up from a teller to vice president of commercial lending.
Wow. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, no small feat.
No, but it was just that, banking was a means to the next step. It was about an evolution. I'm definitely not the type of person that sits behind a desk crunching numbers. I really love numbers. I think numbers give you so much information. But being a lender, really, I always had that itch, right? I had my first business was, I think when I was 15, I started my own landscaping company and did like walkways, patios, things like that. And I always knew I wanted to work for myself. And I think working at the bank was the safe way of having maybe a side hustle I could fund. And
Yeah.
then it got to the point where, what I wanted to learn was how to underwrite a business, how businesses get funding, how they get lending. And then once I got that, I just kind of became almost just overly like complacent.
Hmm.
And complacence, I think, just kills creativity.
Yeah.
So I had to go. And that's then how I jumped into name net worth.
Nice. Now at the bank, you got to see like the underbelly of business, like just the pure numbers, mechanical side of the business, none of the creativity, none of the decor.
Yep.
When you actually decided to do your own thing, which is name net worth, how did that benefit you just being able to see the engine for 10 years before putting the rest of the car together?
Well, it was really helpful because as far as like getting funding,
Hmm.
I knew how to do a profit and loss. I knew how to do a balance sheet. I knew how to do a business plan, even though we don't use them in entrepreneurial world.
That's right.
But I understood the core aspects and running projections and forecasts. I knew how to do all of that because I saw other companies do it, and I actually had to underwrite their numbers. So it was great because I knew how to format everything. I was extremely proficient in Excel. So if I had an investor looking at my, my deck, wow, this guy actually knows what he's doing. And it looked like it was underwritten by, a commercial analyst, right? But the other side of it was being in the banking world, you don't shoot for the stars when it comes to your projections, your forecasts. You're very conservative. That's the way you build your models,
Mm-hmm.
is worst case scenario. So that actually worked against me because that was a big feedback I got early on when we were going for our second round of investor money of, Jeremy, like, I don't see anything sexy about your numbers. I'm like, well, I'm being conservative. And they're like, we don't want you to be conservative.
Yeah.
We want to see like you have vision, how to get there. And yeah, some stuff might happen where that may not be achievable, but we want to see where you're looking, not necessarily, hey, we're just going to, be conservative.
Yeah, that's the interesting part of starting a business. And when you're coming in as an entrepreneur and you're working with or trying to partner up with money people, like what you're taught to do is kind of counterintuitive to what you actually should do. Like when you're
Yeah.
thinking about your own business, you don't want to lose. So you're thinking of ways to defend against a loss. And then that's good, right? But when you meet with an investor, they want to be wild, they want to be excited, they want to feel like you're going to do 100x.
Yeah.
So they want to see numbers that go that high. And then from your point of view, you're like, but I'm just starting. I've never built nothing like that. So I want to do it in increments. And they don't really have the patience for those type of increments sometimes, at least in conversation.
Well, and I thought about it not even from the patients. I thought about it from more of, I wanted them to see that I was being fiscally responsible with their
Mm-hmm.
money. That's what I was trying to show them, is like, hey, this is all I really need, and I can get this far. Where what they really wanted to know was, no, I want to know how much it's so that you explode, right? Like
Exactly.
how you like really kill it. Like, okay,
Yeah.
you need
Yeah.
500 grand now. I think that's going to burn through really quick. But I actually personally think I can do, really well with that and bootstrap it. And they're like, no, how about we get you $1 million? And then that gets you that 10x of what you thought you were going to get. And I'm like, well, this shit doesn't make any sense. I'm like, I thought I was doing something good. Every time I
Yeah.
said conservative, they're like, entrepreneurs aren't conservative. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. So from that, did you take away that they want you to generate that 100x, ask for more money, but they want you to put a bunch of contingencies in place to make them feel comfortable with giving you that much money?
We didn't get that far. And what I mean by that is, like we were going for that big raise. Like we were going, I think, for $1 million raise. We had already done a $400,000 round. And we were going for $1 million, and everyone kept asking, well, when are you going to need to come back, to
Mm-hmm.
get more money? And what would that look like? That was the big question we didn't have. And we had to come up with it. And it was like, oh, we're going to get 5 million. We need 5 million. Oh, well, what are
Yeah.
you going to need that for? What's that going to get you? And it's like, well, that's like, you know, 18 months, 2 years from now. Like we could be a dramatically different company.
Yeah.
So what they really wanted you to do is have all of your avenues mapped out, which we did. But by the time we got there, that's when our intellectual property was stolen. And that's what put us inevitably out of business.
Wow. Now let's unpack it a little bit more for the audience. You raise money very successfully, by the way, um,
Thanks.
for an app that you created. tell us how this app came about and what made you create it.
So the bank that I was working at the time, I would network literally breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then, after dinner at networking events Monday through Thursday. Pretty much every day of the actual work week, with the exception of Friday, because I had to maintain my marriage. And the bank that I was working for, like, they didn't really value it. Like, they were just like, they came to me and they said, your networking's not working. And they pretty much told me to stop. And I'm like, do you realize, like, first of all, I bleed the colors. I'm a super loyal person. So, like, it kind of pissed me off when they said that, because I'm taking my extra time that they're not paying for, and I'm working for the bank. That's number one. Number two, I was like, they're so wrong. And so what I did is I put together an Excel spreadsheet just to really, like, stick it to this guy that was my new boss. And I came up with the fact, and these are true numbers, by the way. So out of, like, the 92 customers that I brought in my tenure there, 78% were indirectly or directly affected positively positively impacted by my networking. Okay, whether a board service, networking groups, whatever it may be. And then I was the president of an organization that it's called the Young Professional Society. 48% of my business directly came from that. Which was funny. And I generated $19 million worth of deposits for that bank in my tenure, directly from networking. And I went to him and I was like, boom, yeah, this shit works. And he literally, he took this and he was like, yeah, I'll take a look at that. I'm like, I mean, this was the most verbose spreadsheet. And then I was like, I guarantee there's other people that have the same problem, right? Because a lot of people in the corporate world are like, oh, go out and network. But if you really like it and you're really good at it, they're like, oh, no, you shouldn't be doing this as much. And I guarantee there was other people that thought about, well, what's the value of my network? And I saw it was 19 million people. I mean, $19 million. I'm like, that's shit. That really shows, how much a beer is worth when you go out to have drinks with somebody, And what's the return, the ripple effect of if I take you out for a drink and we start, and that's like the spark that creates this great referral relationship or direct customer relationship. And then you refer me, and you can start to see this network occur of one instance. What's the price tag on that? And so we came up with an app. It was called Name Net Worth, that measured the return on investment of networking. It was like the butterfly effect as moving forward as to you and I meeting and what is the value of that, and how people interact. So what we did, the value proposition that was, we take your professional networking activity and turn it into more closed sales opportunity. So it was an app where you exchange information. It tracks where you meet people so that you know where to go back to meet more people that are generating business or giving you referrals.
Wow. So let me ask, on that side of things, when you see that companies are looking to understand social media, they're looking to understand data, it takes me back to the thoughts I have in my mind about the idea that they want the data but don't know how to use it. Because they want you to build a network, which you did, and then you built it organically as a human being first. And then to prove to your boss that it was valuable, you quantified it. And when you showed them the quantity, the actual dollars worth of your network, they still didn't like it. So it must have felt crazy going through that process.
Well, yeah, because I think, when you talk about startups in general, you talk about timing, right? The problem's there, right? But is the world ready to solve it? I mean, and that's a big thing, I think, where a lot of startups mess up or have issues, because they have that me search, right? This affects me, but how many me's are there in the world?
That's right.
And are they ready to solve it yet? And that's the big question I don't think people think about when they start a startup is, yes, you're ready to solve it, but how many of you are there, and how bad of a problem is it, and are they ready to solve it? And that was one of the big things that we ran into, which is companies, they spend a lot of money on sponsorships. They spend a lot of money on these memberships, and also expense accounts, but they really didn't care.
Exactly.
The companies did, but then, like, our initial customer point was chambers of commerce. And what we actually could do is track how much business was exchanged at an event and say, oh, your event generated $280,000 worth of customer value. And it actually didn't develop that much. And so we went to them, we said, you guys got to make this better. And we gave them the data and they were like, yeah, we're good. So they weren't ready to solve this problem yet. And they didn't want to believe it existed because it wasn't hurting them yet. Like membership wasn't dropping off. If membership was dropping off precipitously, then they need to solve that problem. And then that data, then they could have evolved, but they didn't need to.
And that's how companies like Netflix put blockbusters out of business.
Correct.
Because they're playing defense, not offense.
Yep, exactly.
All the time. Now I gotta tell you, when we were in the same cohort at BBM, and I think it was right before they announced that you had a raise, and it was just murmurs around the room like, Jeremy just raised $250,000. Like, we was like, what? And it was crazy, you know. Then when they announced it minutes later in front of the room, it was just like, wow. It was like, you know, these things that they talk about happen to the entrepreneurs, raising capital or making money actually happen. And I think what I like about what you did is that you had a very strategic and systematic way of actually unfolding and building out the platform to make sure you were wise with every single dollar. And I think most people don't think that way. They think it's going to be the wild, wild west. I'm just going to throw some stuff at the board and see what sticks. And it's not my money. So if they lose, they lose. I'll still be okay.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing, and that's one of the biggest things that I think I still do, is since then I've helped raise, I don't know, it's like $3 or $4 million for other startups. And I love doing that. The way I work is really great because raising money is fun. It's so much fun. A lot of people get scared about it because they're, you know, there's this adage where it says, you ask for money, you get advice. You ask for advice, you might get both. Right. And the interesting thing is I wasn't raising money. I was just telling this, like, you know, in my like really energetic way to somebody. I'm like, here's what I want to do. I want to be able to revolutionize the way people interact. I want to be able to give people more insight on how to sell better, how to make better relationships. And I'll do it through this app. And somebody's like, holy shit, that sounds awesome. Are you looking to raise money? And I'm like, yes, I am. yes, I am. And it all happened. The craziest thing is we raised $300,000. No, 300, it was something like that. 300 grand in like 3 days. And because I went to somebody, I saw somebody in the VDM community. I was like, holy shit, man, I just raised 100 grand. He goes, why didn't you come to me? I would have given you money. And I'm like, what? What is going on here? And so they ended up matching, and then we raised another 100,000 on top of it. And I was like, but I thought at that time, because I was so naive, I was like, wow, raising money is really easy. And I know that makes me sound like a dick right now because now I know how hard it is.
So let's unpack that.
Yeah.
A lot of people they hear that and they could think a bunch of things. Like I mean, I know you personally, so I'm not worried about what people think about you because I know you personally, but they could think he's a dick. They could think privileged. It's easy for you to say, oh, you came from the banking community. Easy for you to raise money. Yeah. But let's unpack it. What is your mindset that allows you to just get these things that you want? Like, first of all, you don't care about not getting it because you weren't even trying, but what is your mindset when going into pursuing your businesses that allows you to attract money and opportunity?
I think it's the energy. I think, so I teach a sales class right now at Elms College, and there was a quote that I was reading with my students last night, actually, and it's, sales isn't predicated necessarily on how good the product is, but how much the people that sell it believe in it. Right. And so like when I talk about something that I'm like jacked up about, like, and when I believe in something, I'm over the top, I'm in like, and I analyze it, I breathe it, feel it, eat it, whatever. And you go to somebody and you have that energy and like, somebody's like, whoa, like, and they said that to me. And again, this is not like oh, Jeremy, you're great thing, but people are like, no, we like your idea and we see the vision, but we're investing in you because you have so much passion for what you're doing. And I think that was one of the things in the beginning, that one part. And then the other part was I spent my life networking. So I
Yeah.
knew a lot of people. And it
Mm-hmm.
was funny because all the people that I knew weren't the ones that gave me money. It was the ones that, well, like one of them was, but that was the spark, is I was just having a random meeting. And I think when you go in any situation, you know, you can relate it to anything. If you go in desperate,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to look desperate.
Mm-hmm.
And people are going to say, "Ooh, there's a problem here. This doesn't pass the
Mm-hmm.
smell test."
Mm-hmm.
But if you
Mm-hmm.
go in and you're like, you're burning it down, you're getting after it, like, and you hustle and people feel it, and so that they know that this guy won't let me fail. This
Yep.
guy won't let my money fail.
Yep.
I think that's the difference.
Yeah.
And also, you really show the difference. Like this gym that I helped, it's called Fit Lab. It's in West Springfield. We did a small raise for him. It took one call. That's it. It's also knowing what people's where their kind of barometer of, or where they play.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and this guy actually flipped houses, but I knew he was itching for something more. And because he was talking about investing in a cannabis startup, because I was doing a little bit of that work too.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, hey man, that's a little bit more stable. How about this? And lo and behold, boom, there we go. So I think it's more about just knowing the right people, making the
Yeah.
right asks,
Yeah.
but also showing showing emotion. Emotion is what sells people. You know, I think those are the things.
And I think people, again, it's counterintuitive, right? Like people think that business is not about emotions, it's about business, but they don't understand that everybody that we possibly look up to in the business world, as they were crazy fanatical about the ideas that they had
Oh yeah,
before they got funded. And sometimes I tell entrepreneurs and even some of my friends, it's like, the problem with you is you're not weird enough. And by that I mean, the problem with you is that you really have a hankering for this idea, but you're scared of how weird you might look for being obsessed by it. And
yeah,
that's what's stopping you from getting to that next level. And then other times I believe people pour that passion into the wrong audience. Like you're talking to your uncle who's already a pessimist, who's never started a business, and you're giving him all your energy and excitement. And then when he doesn't respond, you're saying maybe this is not a good idea.
yeah.
It's
I
so
say there's
nuts.
Americans and Americans,
Yeah,
right? I 100 and one of the things that you learn from VVM is not everyone's your customer.
that's right.
I mean, it was weird because we had the reverse, right? Normally you get a lot of no's first before you get the sale.
Mm-hmm.
We get the sale first and then a lot of no's after, or
Mm-hmm.
maybes, which I was like, well, I mean, which was nice because we already had a yes. And the big problem is getting that first domino to fall.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, no one wants to be in, their own place by themselves, taking a risk. But if other people are taking a risk, well, they're like, well, they must have thought something about this, right? They must have saw something. So it's easier. That
Yeah.
first domino is the really hard one to fall. And so, but I think that's one of my favorite parts of startup world is funding. I really think it's exciting. And you also get to be around really incredible people and successful people. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I remember when we were doing our second round pitch, we got to pitch the head of the Angel Capital Association for the country.
Wow.
And this guy was straight fire. I mean, he reminded, the movie Rounders?
Yep.
Yeah, he reminded me of John Malkovich in Rounders.
Mm-hmm.
But he just tore us to shreds. And it was like, wow. And instead of going and like sitting there and sulking, I'm like, okay, so what can we do to be better? I want to have
Mm-hmm.
another chance to come back and I will win this. What can I do better? Like, just pretty much just shit on me because I want to get better. And I think
Yeah.
that the learning is the endless desire to learn and be better, I think was another big thing about funding. And just when somebody lambastes you and normally people will walk away, I'm like, okay, well, I can be better. How can I be better? How can I make you a believer?
Yeah. And the great thing about it is I once heard a quote that if you quote unquote, be humble enough to bow to the master, then you'll be a master amongst other people.
Ooh.
And I think that when you get in front of those people who traveled that road in business or whatever whatever channel of life you're going down, ask for the critical feedback. The compliments will do you only a little good.
Yep.
Get that critical feedback. And then when you go back and shape up your product and you meet the second person, you're brand new to the second person. They never met you before. You come off so much more polished and informed and excited that they get the full whiff of the lesson you just learned without any of the downside. But so many people are scared to get criticism, constructive criticism, that they just bow away from the whole idea. It's so nuts.
And to that point, which is crazy, and I kind of just, this kind of had gave me clarity because, you know, in Lean Launchpad, they talk about, you know, going in, interviewing your customer because you don't have any customers yet. Even though you do, you don't, right? Like it's a concept, it's an idea, it needs to be validated, right? Same thing goes for getting an investor, right? You go and just have a conversation. That's why I always say, if you ask for advice, you may get advice and funding, but if you ask for just funding, you're just most likely going to get advice.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of the people that actually ended up funding us, we asked for advice. Like we really did. And then we came back and we said, hey, we took what you said and look at what we did. And then that proved to them they can evolve.
Yeah.
These people, they can evolve, and they had a vision for where we could go, and they knew if we'd listen to them. And that even happened with my board of my board of directors. We had some really powerful people on there. One was the #3 chief information officer in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all because of that. I asked him for advice, or actually he came up to me one time and like blatantly, like this is exactly how he said, he goes, Jeremy, you know, you pitch really well, but your pitch sucks. And most people would have told this guy to go F himself.
Yeah.
And instead I was like, okay, tell me how I could be better. We had dinner, we shot the shit. He like ran train on me, and I kept going back to him and like, how, and then I said, look, I took what you said. And he goes, that's way better. He goes, how can I get involved?
You know, in short, sometimes you know, you go to, you can say high school or college, and you got these guys who have raw talent, but they don't make it to the league, or they don't get picked by a school. And the #1 thing they lack that you're saying that you possess, coachability.
It's number one. Number one. It's so important.
Oh my God, coachability.
You can't be coached, then you can't play.
Yeah. And hey, and if you decide that you don't want to be coached, you better be that damn good.
Yeah. I mean, you better be that Randy Moss. You better be that T.O. Like, you better have unbelievable skill set. But at the end of the day, how are you going to work with other people?
That's
like
right.
In the entrepreneurial world, there are no unicorns. Like, you don't do this on your own by yourself. There's no solopreneurs. It doesn't work. You don't possess all the qualities. And that's one of the things that I think really sets entrepreneurship apart from, you know, a lot of other things in life, even team sports, is you don't have all the skills. You need to have at least one other person. Like Mark Zuckerberg had Edward Savarin. You had, you know, Woz, and you had Jobs. Like you had the greats all have another one. And that person's overshadowed by the true great that we actually recognize, or the more gregarious, open person. But that's the thing in entrepreneurship. You can't do it on your own. You just can't.
100%. Wow, that was a good opening conversation. Now, what about after Name Net Worth? What became your next thing?
So I found out what I messed up on in Name Net Worth, and I didn't know how to develop an app. Right, so I wasn't a developer, and so it was a lot of it was out of my hands. So one thing I did know a lot about was financing, real estate transactions. And it was always something I wanted to get into. And during Name Net Worth, I was still, I was actually running. So I was a commercial real estate lender, left that position, got hired by one of my clients, my lending clients, and to come in and flip his real estate company. And because I was doing some consulting on the side and I just wanted to get out of banking. And we doubled the size of his company in a year.
Wow.
So I was like, wow, I really like this. I saw a whole new lens of how a business, I already knew how the core aspects of how a business runs. And this guy was we didn't jive well. He was like working for Jordan Belfort, you know, a guy that did a lot of drugs, strippers, crazy. And I'm like, I can't do this world. So I left and joined up with one of his biggest competitors and went out and just called him up. I didn't know him. And I was like, hey, I knew somebody that knew him. I was like, hey, I think you need me. He's like, who are you? And I was like, here's what I did for this guy who is not even close as good as you. Look what I can do for you. And long and short, I went over there, started coaching top agents, learned a lot about that, and helped you know, using Lean Launchpad and teaching them how to create their business, knowing their customer market, etc. And then started SR Commercial Realty, which is right back there on the whiteboard. And now we have, I mean, we're 2.5 years old. We have 120 properties that we represent. I have 6 agents on my team, which is actually really big for a commercial outfit. And what I did is I looked at the problems. I truly listened to what problems my customers had. And the ones they said is, you know, they always say the same thing. Holy crap, you called me back, Jeremy. I'm like, people don't call you back? Nope. No, they don't call me back. Like, oh, okay, well, that's simple. And then the other one was whenever you list a property, you put it up for sale. They kept saying the same thing. Is like, yeah, the guy just came and threw a sign on my building and then I never heard from him again. Okay, so they want to know what's going on with their property. So we marketed it better so that they could actually see the activity of us marketing it.
Yeah.
And then gave them reporting, and then we're super responsive to their needs and communicated really well. And we exploded. And it was because we worked solely on the product and just kept beating down doors and were relentless. And all the other people, you know, in my industry, you know, are multi-generational people that have kind of had it maybe handed to them, or they've had to earn it through the business, but then got something. Whereas, like, you know, commercial real estate, there was a really large barrier to entry because they actually try to push you out and not work with you. So the lending background actually helped me out because I already knew a lot of commercial clients and could utilize that. So that's what I've been doing. Most people don't think of real estate as a startup, but because they always think of tech companies or innovative products like yours. But yeah, it's been really exciting. I think we closed almost 100 transactions this year.
Wow.
So yeah, it's exciting. I only do commercial because I can't do the emotional stuff like residential.
I get it.
Thank God, I don't like the color of these walls. I just want to say, go to Sherwin-Williams or go to Home Depot and get some Behr paint. $75.
Yeah.
You know? So.
Yeah, I do understand that people like commercial real estate because it's just more straightforward at times.
Very logical and functional.
That's what's up. That's what's up. Hey, I really appreciate you coming out, but I want to ask you too, what's on the horizon for you with SR Realty? What's next?
So it's a good question. I've started doing some real estate investing on my own, and with some groups, buying some property. And interestingly enough, the property that we just purchased in downtown Springfield, right near the casino, we actually are we're pricing it towards entrepreneurs. So kind of a co-work space, but a co-work space is normally small little units. We have those, but we actually have suites. And so I'm positioning it differently because most of these big office buildings, you know, they just don't accommodate, you know, startups. And that's the actual culture that we want. So that's one of the things I'm doing. Also, I think, you know, with SR Commercial, we're trying to continually evolve and use new concepts, new marketing, you know, which isn't sexy, but that's one of the things we're really trying to be disruptive in this industry of commercial real estate, which is a bunch of old white dudes that are the age of our fathers. And there's not a lot of young people. And the other part too, that I think we're really doing is, when I first got into commercial real estate in Western Massachusetts, there was only 2 women in the whole entire industry within Western Massachusetts for commercial real estate. Now women dominate residential. So to give you a little idea, here's the deal. 1,600 residential agents in Western Massachusetts. 50 commercial agents. Okay. 2 women. I have 3. Now there are 5. No, now there's 4, and I have 3 of them. And the reason being is because I think that, number one, women should always be included, number one. But number 2, I think there's a huge opportunity that's being missed. There's so many women business owners. Quite honestly, I work better with women in general, but there's a different perspective. And that's, I think, another thing that we're really trying to do is break that, that ceiling in this industry, which is dominated by men, whether we like it or not. And I don't. And that's why I'm not just complaining about it. I'm speaking with my feet and hiring women, because I think that's another, big opportunity that we have. And it's working quite well.
Yeah, it's amazing how we understand things from a high level, like how women create great businesses and how, you know, they become titans
They
of
do.
industry. But if we want to hire them to be salespeople, and you know, we're kind of iffy.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
weird. It's weird, the disconnect. It's so weird.
And it's a different approach, and that's why, like, it's such a diverse world now. You need diversity in a sales approach. You need diversity in workplace, and we're doing it in a very interesting way because, you know, and the other thing too is we're actually on the minority front too. So that's the interesting part of where we're trying to hire people that are very reflective or represent or mirror the communities that we serve. I don't
Understood.
know why anyone wouldn't do that. And that's, I know
Yeah.
that sounds non-cutting edge, but it actually is really cutting edge in this industry.
Yeah, and I think under it all, for your competition, it's just a a rash of laziness. It
Oh,
just
it
sounds like
did.
they're lazy.
Pig get
It really
fat,
sounds like they're
hog gets
lazy.
slaughtered. That's what it is. Like,
Yeah.
this, and that's why I saw a sleeping, you know, industry that had a lot of activity, but the people that weren't active were the brokers, and they just sat in a chair and collected a check.
Mhm.
And I listen, I don't mind going for a run and collecting a check, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah. Well, on that note, Jeremy, thank you again for being on the podcast. And
No
thank
problem.
everybody for tuning in. We got a lot out of this week's show. And again, whether you're reading an article, listening to this on iTunes, or actually watching the video, I know you guys are going to appreciate everything Jeremy brought to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thanks for having me.